Hello and welcome to today's webinar by the Computer Electronic Accommodations Program, better known as CAP. I'm John Sanders and I'll be taking you through the CAP Needs Assessment model today. First, I want to give you a little background information on CAP. Our mission is to provide assistive technology and accommodations to ensure people with disabilities and wounded service members have equal access to the information environment and opportunities in the Department of Defense and throughout the federal government. Although the mission doesn't explicitly mention needs assessments, they're a critical component of what we do to ensure that what we provide is the most effective solution. In doing so, CAP uses a three-tiered approach by focusing on the job, the individual, and the solution. So let's start with the job. Now, when looking at the job, first and foremost, you want to identify what tasks or duties are required for that specific job. Is the individual doing a lot of remote work? Are they in meetings? Where are the tasks actually performed? How is the workstation configured at the location that the tasks have to be completed at? All sorts of things like that to figure out if someone was to successfully do this job, what steps would they have to take? You'd also want to look at things like, are they full-time versus part-time? How many hours of the day are they spent on the computer? And what applications are used on the computer when they're using it? An example of this would be, I had two individuals come to me in the same week, and when I asked them about their job, they both started by saying, I work with computers all day long. Well, one of them turned out to be a graphic designer who did 95% of his work with his mouse, whereas the other one was actually a database administrator who programmed systems and emailed constantly within his team to make sure projects were on schedule. So if you look at just those two individuals, knowing that they used the computer wasn't sufficient. Knowing the applications they used on the computer, and one was very keyboard intensive and the other mouse intensive, may have led to different solutions for those individuals. Now, when talking about the job and what's required of the job, a lot of times an individual's diagnosis may come up. Now, a diagnosis may not be necessary in some instances. However, it could help in understanding some of the limitations an individual is experiencing. This usually assists people in kind of understanding, and a good segue to the second stage of the needs assessment process, which is the individual. In this stage, listening is key because no two individuals will experience the same symptoms from one diagnosed condition. In addition to talking about the functional limitations they're experiencing from that condition, you also must consider other things, such as, is it a newly acquired disability or existing? Clearly, an individual might have a different outlook on their functional limitations. For example, if a service member was blinded while on active duty and was later in life blinded versus someone who was born blind, they would probably have a much different outlook on that, as well as some of the potential solutions to be offered. We'd also highlight things like, is it progressive or temporary? For instance, if an individual broke 4 fingers on their dominant hand and needed a cast that created no additional digits for them to use for a period of 8 weeks versus someone who may have lost all 4 fingers on their hand. One being temporary might warrant a different solution than another one being permanent. And when looking at something as progressive, you want to see what the prognosis is for the future. For example, if an individual was requesting screen magnification software because they had low vision, well, it would be important to see what might be the prognosis for that individual. One instance I had here at CAP was where an individual was requesting magnification software, and the specialist in charge actually provided screen reading software. When I asked about it, the specialist told me that he had actually picked up the phone, spoken with the individual, and upon speaking with them realized that doctors anticipated within a year to a year and a half the individual would go completely blind because of a degenerative eye condition. So knowing this information allowed CAP to provide one tool that could work not only now but also in the future for that individual, so he wouldn't have to relearn a new tool later on as his condition continued to deteriorate. You also want to look at people's comfort level with technology. Some people might want a lower tech solution, for example. But looking at what they're comfortable with and if there have been anything tried in the past is always a good step when you're speaking with them. Also, knowing what an individual has tried in the past can make sure that you're going to build on past successes or failures in attempting to accommodate someone for what they're going through. The last thing you want to do is make an individual who you're trying to assist recreate the wheel by going through all of the things they may have done already, either by themselves or with another individual who was previously trying to help them. So once you have an understanding of the job and the individual's limitations in completing that job, you can work towards a solution that will bridge the gap between the two. And that brings us to the last step, the solution. Now, a lot of times when you're looking at the solution, you have to consider things like, what are the procedures for installing something on a network? Or what role does security play? Especially in the Department of Defense, throughout the federal government, security trumps accessibility every time. So it's important that we know what things may be approved for the network, what tools could actually be viable in that individual's electronic or physical environments, so we're not providing something that won't actually work and help that individual perform their job tasks. And lastly, we don't want to provide tools and not give the opportunity for the best utilization of them. So CAP always works with the individual in the solution stage to see if any additional resources might be needed to fully utilize the tool, or potentially on-site training or remote training if that's what the individual needs. So now that you have an idea of what our process is with the job, the individual, and the solution, it's apparent that the biggest piece of the puzzle as you're going through this process is being aware of the type of technology that could actually assist with those levels of limitations. So what I'd like to do now is briefly go through some of the different types of technology that could assist people with varying limitations. First, we'll cover dexterity. Now, dexterity is essentially the ability to physically interact with the computer. This could be something as mild as a repetitive stress injury or as severe as paralysis or even an amputation. This could be something as simple as an alternative keyboard or pointing device, something that will allow an individual to control their cursor with one finger, or a touchpad or something along those lines. Having a keyboard that is smaller to allow a one-handed typist to not have to have as much travel distance between keys. There's an array of different options there based on different limitations, but it's allowing a different way to physically input information into the computer. It could also include where those tools are located. For instance, document holders holding hard copy documents in a correct location that a person can see them without causing additional strain or injury. Or even the location of those input tools on a keyboard tray. Additionally, a situation may be severe enough where an individual will need the ability to not use their hands at all to interact with the computer. This can happen with speech recognition software, allowing the user to control the computer with their voice, and other hands-free options such as head gestures or, in some instances, eye-tracking technology. This can also include headsets or handsets, not only for your interaction with the computer, but other tasks such as telephone use. Now I'd like to look at vision. Some people with little to no functional vision may utilize voice output. This could include screen readers, which is essentially your computer reading everything that's on the screen instead of you visually looking at it, or even scanner readers, which could be a portable device that scans and reads it aloud at a remote location, or even something that interacts with the computer, so it scans it and then your computer can thus read the information back. Individuals who are Braille literate may actually utilize terminals or embossers to where they could create and print their own Braille materials as well to have hard copy documents that are accessible to them. Others may be a little more mobile and need portable note takers. These could be things with maybe a QWERTY or a Braille keyboard where you could input notes and then that user could extract the information either in electronic or auditory formats. Some people might have a certain level of functional vision, so instead of going completely to reading or feeling, they could want some color contrast or magnification. In this case, something like a closed-circuit television or CCTV may suffice. These come in mobile options, such as smaller ones that can be taken to meetings, or desktop versions that could actually magnify entire documents, change the color contrast, and get it into a format and size that the individual can see. Screen magnification software does essentially the exact same thing as a CCTV, however it works with electronic information on the computer. So having the computer electronic information accessible to that individual in the same way that a CCTV would make a hard copy document accessible. Now people can experience many different things when it comes to hearing, including difficulties with volume, clarity, or pitch. Depending on what the individual is actually experiencing, something like an assistive listening device, or ALD, may be sufficient, which can actually amplify sounds. The individual can hear it at a volume that's perceivable by them. There's types of amplified telephones and signalers that will let you know if your phone is ringing for an individual who might need that amplification on the phone versus in person. There are even text-based things such as teletypewriters or TTYs that interact either through a phone line or your computer that will allow an individual to communicate via text. Some individuals may be sign language literate, and individuals who use sign language to communicate could use video communication devices such as video phones or even a webcam. Additionally, there is software and services that could allow for closed captioning of equipment and in-house videotapes, so anything that could be used maybe in an onboarding process or a training module would be accessible to anyone. Lastly, I want to highlight some tools that can assist with cognitive or communication issues. Now, when it comes to cognitive limitations, people experience certain diagnoses completely differently than someone else. So there's a lot of tools out there that can provide different features that could assist some people with what they're experiencing. Things like word prediction software, which could reduce the amount of typing or help with spelling, or even literacy software, which could actually allow people to find definitions or even do mind mapping and use visual cues that would assist people in comprehension and concentration while they're using the computer. Additionally, someone might need a cueing or memory aid, such as a portable digital assistant that they could take and use to prompt them as they're more mobile versus sitting at a computer, depending on their job functions. And also, it's more important when you're looking at these devices that you know the capabilities of the device so you can match it up to the appropriate limitations someone may be experiencing in the workplace. For example, speech recognition software was mentioned earlier on when we were talking about Dexterity. However, there could be some person that experiences a cognitive deficit where they say, hey, I am able to speak clearly and articulately, and I can express myself fine. However, when you put a keyboard in front of me, it's as if a brick wall has been built. So allowing someone to speak what they say instead of type it on a keyboard could be an accommodation for someone with a cognitive limitation. Additionally, something like a screen reader where an individual is getting multisensory output, where they're seeing the word, it's highlighted and spoken to them while it's being read, can allow them to focus and concentrate on what they're trying to focus on. And assistive listening devices, or ALDs, are something that an individual who might work in a noisy environment can actually amplify the noise of the person they're trying to speak to above the rest of the background noise, again assisting with concentration. Communication can come in various forms, including something as simple as an amplifier that amplifies the sound volume of the speaker's voice. This could be both for on the phone or in person. But it can also be severe enough that you could use an individual can't speak at all, whereas an augmentative communication device, or AAC, may be beneficial. Now, augmentative communication devices can allow speech output while the person controls with their hand or even in some instances their eyes. So now that we have an idea of the needs assessment process that CAP utilizes and the types of assistive technology that could bridge those functional limitations for an individual, I'd like to take us through a couple case studies to kind of show you how the needs assessment process can work in action. So to start, I'd like to focus on an individual who's a Navy civilian, actually suffered a traumatic brain injury from a car accident, didn't report any other limitations. Now, first we looked at his job. He was a recruiter who actually worked in a cube farm. He had a lot of email use, a lot of interaction on the phone, and participated in in-person meetings. He also had to go to career fairs on different military installations to try and recruit some people who were separating from active duty to come work for the Navy. After those, he would have hard copy resumes that he would have to come back and read. And he would also have to read the different documents pertaining to policy or events while he was on his computer. Now, his computer was actually on a secure network with the Navy, and it only allowed certain software or devices to connect to it. So he had limited options when we were looking for him. After we looked at his job, we asked him as an individual what he was dealing with. He reported difficulty with hearing and also concentration, and stated he was really embarrassed to admit a limitation. He wasn't comfortable with assistive technology and didn't want any tool that would be conspicuous for the people around him as he worked in a very public location in his cubicle. So after looking at his job and him as an individual, we looked at the potential solutions. In this case, we actually provided an assistive listening device. This is actually something that he held in his hand that didn't require the use of anyone else. He was able to put it on a table without anyone noticing when he was in in-person meetings and have it as an array setting, so anyone speaking around the table would have their voice amplified so he could focus on that individual. But it also had a zoom setting, which at career fairs, in these big auditoriums with kind of the dull roar of a lot of people going to different booths, he was able to amplify the sound of the one person in front of him speaking above the noise of the career fair and allowing him to focus and concentrate on that individual. And lastly, there was a specific screen magnification software that was approved for use on his network. This was actually something that he could take some of the documents that he was reviewing, some of the emails that he had to type review, and he could actually have that highlighted and spoken to him while he was reading it. Having this multisensory output allowed him to really concentrate and focus, and he was able to successfully complete his job task because of it. So let's give another example of how the same agency with slightly different limitations could also assist someone. So this is another Navy civilian. This individual was actually active duty Navy Marine Corps, and he lost his right arm and sustained a traumatic brain injury while on active duty when an improvised explosive device detonated near him. First, we asked about his job. He stated that almost all his work was at his desk. He had a lot of email, and he used Microsoft Word, composed and edited documents frequently. He was constantly on the phone while typing because people would communicate about things that he was working on. His mouse and keyboard were on his desk. So he was constantly reaching up with his one hand to try and type and use the mouse. Well, after we got a feel for what he had to do for his job, we then went on to him as the individual. He reported difficulty typing and using the mouse because of the reaching back and forth. He also said trying to hold the phone by his shoulder and typing at the same time was causing some issues. Additionally, his TBI didn't cause any memory or concentration problems, but he suffered from photophobia, and so he received frequent headaches because of the glare coming back from the screen into his eyes. So after we got a feel for him as an individual and what he had to do for his job tasks, we've looked for the solution. First, we provided speech recognition software. This allowed him to communicate in writing with all the typing and editing that he did with his voice, which limited the number of keystrokes he had to do with his remaining hand. Additionally, we provided a headset with a switch box. This allowed him to switch back and forth from the phone to his speech recognition when he was typing. So when he got a phone call and had to type at the same time, he would be able to type and speak with the headset on his head without having to hold the phone on his shoulder. Additionally, we provided a mini keyboard and touchpad. Now, this was placed on a keyboard tray, so not only did he not have to reach up to it, but it was in a very comfortable position for him to reach. But the touchpad was right below the space bar on his keyboard. so he could type and then reach down with his hand and control his cursor at the same time. It eliminated the lateral movement of reaching back and forth between the keyboard and the mouse for him. And lastly, we provided screen magnification software. Now, screen magnification software has a lot of benefits, but in his case, the only thing he was using on a consistent basis was the inverted color contrast. This allowed him to see a Word document as white on black instead of black on white. Reducing the amount of white on the screen changed the amount of glare and assisted him in not suffering from so many migraines. So now that we've covered kind of a couple examples and case studies of this, I just want to point out a few resources to you here at CAP. First is our Technology Evaluation Center in the Pentagon, better known as CAPTech. You could feel free to email them at cap.captech@mail.mil. They do in-person needs assessments as well as distance-based needs assessments on the phone and on video teleconference, as well as highlight technology and demonstrate that for individuals who are interested. You can also check out our website at cap.mil. There's a lot of information and resources on there, as well as technology and disability employment law. If there's a specific question you have and you don't want to go to our website, you can always feel free to email us at cap@mail.mil. And I'd also encourage you to check out our YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/thedodcap. Our YouTube channel has an array of assistive technology videos as well as some testimonial videos, so you could hear from CAP customers, get a sense for what their jobs were, and see the types of tools that CAP provided them to assist them in the workplace. I also want to highlight the Department of Labor's Job Accommodation Network, www.askjan.org. JAN is a great resource for accommodations that may be outside of CAP's scope of services. So if it's something not pertaining to the telecommunications environment or even on disability or employment law, you can feel free to contact JAN. If you have any questions for us here at CAP, please feel free to contact us either by phone at 703-614-8416 or email at cap@mail.mil. If you are interested in previous webinars that we may have recorded or a list of upcoming topics, please feel free to visit the Training and Outreach section on the CAP website, which is cap.mil. On behalf of all of us here at CAP, I want to thank you for participating in today's webinar.